My name is Joe Maye. I'm a director at Lattice. Lattice is a 23-year-old advisory firm. We were founded in 2003, and we have worked with MSMEs in East Africa and beyond. Our core business has always been strategy, helping small, mid-sized, and large enterprises think through their vision of where they want to be in the future and how they will get there. And people call that strategic planning. And over the last 2 decades, we have worked with a wide variety of businesses across virtually all sectors of the economy in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and a few markets beyond that to help businesses think through their long-term plans and vision and how to effect them. That we call our strategy practice. One of the very pronounced observations is that in most markets in Africa, the customer-facing point is typically a woman. Almost regardless of the sector you're in, the person who's facing the customer is the woman. And so that's probably what we mean by market women. Of course, what's different is that the person who's facing the customer is not necessarily the owner of the enterprise. Many of them are employees. But there's some very interesting things to observe when you talk about how to improve outcomes for market women across sub-Saharan Africa. And so some of the statistics I want to share immediately is the first thing to observe is that on the one hand, we know that agriculture is the biggest direct and indirect employer. And by that, we don't just reference primary production, we talk about the entire agricultural value chain, that 70% of the jobs in Africa are in agriculture. But what most people don't know is that majority of new jobs across most of Africa are actually in wholesale and retail. So you're not looking at the absolute mass of jobs, but saying we have 70% of Africa's population below the age of 34, and every year millions and millions of young people, including young women, are going into the marketplace. And the question you're asking is, how are these people going to make a living? And it turns out that the biggest employer of the biggest creator of new jobs is actually wholesale, retail, and hospitality. And they really all fall under the umbrella of retail businesses. So it's important to understand that anybody who is trying to say, how do we create opportunities for women and for young women on the African continent, the engine and the driver of growth is retail. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? It is neither. It's just what it is. It would be good if we had more jobs in manufacturing and more jobs in agriculture and more jobs in transport. But the fact is, wholesale and retail is the driver of new job or new income opportunities for young men and women going into the workplace, graduating from high school, graduating from university. If you accept that reality, then it's also very interesting to observe that 60% of wholesale and retail businesses in Africa are owned by women, not employ women, but are owned by women. So therefore, anybody who's saying, I want to do some things to improve outcomes for women in marketplaces or women in value chains, you better look at wholesale retail, and because that's where the jobs are and there's more women employed there. So that's a very important thing as we think about achieving impact, to say, how do we improve outcomes for market women? There's several things we've observed. Number one is the idea of constraints. Constraints is a key word. You have these women, they are relatively young. The truth is they are relatively driven. They are driven by many forces. Many of them are single mothers. Many of them have personal or domestic contexts that give them an impetus or a pressure to figure out how to make an income. But even as they go into that, they frequently face constraints. They face regulatory constraints, they face institutional constraints, they face cultural constraints. So you have this subset of a population that is highly motivated, highly energized, and as they step out into the market, they are presented with a set of constraints. And so one of the things that anybody is wanting to do with market women should think about is to say, how do we identify these constraints? How do we understand the root causes? And then how do we address not the symptoms of the constraints, but the root causes of those constraints? So I would say constraints is a key word. The second key word when you think about market women is the idea of variation, of variability. Everything is always in flux. And you and I know that planning requires a reasonably high level of predictability. You have these market women trying to improve their outcomes, their personal outcomes, but functioning in an environment where all the key parameters that drive their outcomes are highly variable. I remember having conversations with a lady who was selling carrots in the biggest wholesale market in Nairobi, and she would leave her home approximately 25 kilometers outside the city center at about 3:30 a.m. in the morning. She has to leave her house in the cold. It's dark. There's immediately safety considerations, has to wait for a bus, get on the bus, go 25 kilometers into the city center, and then wait for the trucks, trucking the wholesale produce. And on any given day, she has no idea how many carrot trucks will come today, what will the price be, and she has only so much cash to work with to say, this is what I'm going to use to buy my inventory. I hope to sell it and then turn it around. And so there was a very high level of variability in her environment. So the second keyword would be variability. Then the third keyword that is interesting for our purposes today is lack of ownership. So in many of these contexts, you find that this woman, this market woman, is the driver, is the operator, but she's not the owner. So you find that she does not own the property that she operates her business from. She does not even have the rent on the property that she owns, that she operates from. There's somebody else, frequently a man, who is the owner of the business, or the owner of the title, or the owner of the lease, and the supplier of capital. So she's on the ground, she's driving the business, she's dealing with customers, she's dealing with suppliers, but when you want to make important decisions, she tells you, okay, let me get back to my stakeholders and I'll talk to you. So a lack of ownership, which also becomes one of the constraints. So I would focus on those three keywords, constraints, variability, and a lack of ownership, are some of the things that need to be dealt with. There's many more. There's safety issues, there's communication issues, but those are the three I would focus on.